I think we should be doing more chazara, doing more review, so that you'll know. I mean, I think we've succeeded, Baruch Hashem, in finishing eight, 9 pages of Gemara, which is nice so far. But I think we need to go over a little. So I'm going to ask you some questions. See, maybe this will be helpful for us to remember the Gemara better. So, when can a person start saying the Shema? Anyone want to just shout out the answer? Okay, Ben.
Well, it depends if you mean the last thing or the beginning. The
beginning. When's the beginning time?
The Kohanim are going to.
No, the morning Shema. When is the morning Shema? The earliest time for the morning Shema.
Eat their
Truma.
Oh, the morning.
Yeah, I'm talking about the morning Shema. Okay, anyone else? Anyone want to raise their hand? Yes, Howard.
You can tell the difference in color.
If I remember correctly, I think we said dawn was the earliest possible time.
Okay, so dawn we talked about like earlier in the previous page, and that was like a real leniency if a person is in an emergency situation. The dawn would be, so that's great that you remember that. But this Gemara is talking about more as the official time, the regular time for the regular person. So what is that?
Sunrise.
The first
Sunrise.
3 hours.
Okay, so sunrise. Sunrise is a preferable time to say Shema right before sunrise, but the proper time to say it, that's the extra preferable time, is right before sunrise, which is, so you're correct about that as well. But when is the official time that it's accepted in the regular law to say Shema? When would that be, Miranda?
I think it was 3 hours after dawn.
So that's the latest time to say the
Oh,
Shema.
sorry.
That's the end time. The end time to say Shema. If you were a man, I would be very upset because you should know when we say Shema. I hope you're not starting at that time. But
No.
you're lucky, you're exempt. So yes, Yehuda.
When you can differentiate between blue and white.
Okay, so the first opinion in the Mishnah was between blue and white, and the second opinion in the Mishnah is
Blue and green.
blue and
White
green.
and green.
Right, blue and green. And then we had some opinions in the Gemara. Well, anyone want to tell us the opinions in the Gemara? There were some other times that it mentioned in the Gemara. Reb Meir said one. I didn't hear you, Ben.
Alot Amud HaShachar is
Okay, someone mentioned that earlier about if a person is in an emergency situation. But the Gemara here on page 9b talked about also some times when a person could start saying, yes, Yehuda.
When you can differentiate between a dog and a wolf.
A dog and a wolf. And then Rabbi Akiva said another time.
Yakir et Chavero.
That's another, okay, that's a achirim. Achirim said when you recognize someone that's standing about 4 cubits away, 6 to 8 feet away. So that's correct, achirim. But what did Rabbi Akiva say? What was his time?
Wild donkey and a domestic donkey.
Oh, that's right, two different donkeys. Okay, so now who is the halacha follow? What did the Gemara say? That Rav Huna said a halacha, who the halacha is like?
Yakir et Chavero.
Mishiyakir, that's right, Ben. The halacha goes like achirim. That Mishiyakir es chavera mishayiras chavera rachik dalaramis v'yakirenu. You see someone that you don't know so well, acquaintance maybe, but you don't know him so well, but he's 6 feet away or 8 feet away, and you recognize him. So that's the time. I believe it's approximately about 25 minutes before dawn. This is the earliest time. That's the appropriate time to start saying Shema. Of course, the preferable time is, like Howard said, is right before Nates, and then say, if you're going to say Shemana Esrei right afterwards at the Nates, at the sunrise, then that would be the most preferable time. And then the time, when does the time extend until? Now, when's the final time to say Shema? What is the
3 hours
opinions
after.
of the Mishnah? There are 2 opinions in the Mishnah. Does anyone know what they are. Yes, Yehuda.
Three halakhic hours into the day.
Into the day. So that was the second opinion, was Rabbi Yeshua until 3 hours into the day. What was the first opinion of the Mishnah?
I think it was sunrise.
Sunrise, that's right. Howard is correct. It's sunrise. Okay, for those of you that are on telephones, you can just shoot out the answer because I can't see if you raise your hand. There's no way. So if you just want to, just speak out the answer, that would be fine. For those that are on, or those that are hiding behind the video screen, can also do that. We would like you to be included, even though you're hiding from us, your face, you can still allow your voice to reveal itself. So what is the reason why 3 hours? What was the reason? Why would 3 hours be appropriate to say the Shema in the daytime? What would be the reason for that? I know the pasuk says uve kumecha, when you get up, but why would that be 3 hours in the day? Like why is that an accepted time that people get up? Does anyone know?
When the kings would rise?
That's right. When the kings would rise. That's correct. Because the kings would get up at that time, and that's considered the latest people who get up. Everyone else has to work, and the kings, they sleep in. They sleep in till 3 hours in the day, and therefore it's a minority of people get up then. But that the Torah tells us uva kumecha, when you get up, which means even a minority of people get up, and that is the time when the kings get up. And it could also be connected to the fact that the Jewish people, we are called malachim. I'm not sure if that's if there's you can say that, but there are Gemaras that say we're called bnei malachim, and there's other places where it even says the Jewish people are called malachim. We're called kings. So maybe that also gives us a reason to follow the way the kings get up. Just a thought. I'm just throwing a thought there that maybe there's reason to follow that minority of people, being that the Jewish people are called bnei malachim or malachim. Yes, Howard.
Is that based on the pasuk Mamlechas Kohanim v'Goy Kadosh?
I'm not sure if that would be a source as well. There are sources, like it talks about when you hire it talks about when you hire a worker, you should make up what you're going to offer them for a meal, because otherwise they are the children of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and they deserve to have a meal like King Solomon would serve. So therefore it's important, so they are like princes. And then it also talks about in the laws of Shabbos that certain things are permissible because kings use that. So if kings do it, it's considered something that's, you are the Yidden are called, we're called Bnei Malachim, and therefore it's considered something that we would do as well. And it's not called, it's not a matter it's not an act that is normally not done. Kings do it, so therefore the Jewish people can also do it. In other words, we are called Bnei Malachim. We should also be able to do it on Shabbos. It's called a regular activity, and not it wouldn't be excluded from Shabbos. So there are such sources about Malachim. I'm not sure if that pasuk maybe Mamlechas Kohanim v'Goy Kadosh. I mean, a Mamlechas Kohanim means a kingdom of priests. So you're saying from the word mamleches would sound like malchus. Maybe I don't know. I have to look up those Gemaras and see if what they say there, if there's a source in the psukim, maybe. So good.
Rabbi Smith.
Yes, David.
I was thinking that since the flesh and blood king, even he gets up after 3 hours. So how do we have the chutzpah to sleep in on the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He? I thought that was maybe a connection, like a flesh and blood king gets up and you're still sleeping for the King of Kings? You have to be up by now.
That's very interesting. It sounds like a good Musser Vort. You're like, that would be a nice, very powerful statement.
In other words, it's not the Peshat you're saying.
Yeah, that is definitely not the pshat, because what you know, that the pasuk says uvakumecha, when you get up. So it, you know, that it should follow when people get up, when, you know, and let's say kings get up early, like let's say kings were to get up early, then would you still say, well, you have to get up early because kings get up early? You know, because how dare you sleep in for the King of Kings if the kings get, you know, and I don't think that would be the halacha. Let's say for whatever reason, kings always got up early. That was their thing. Like Pharaoh used to get up early. He would go swimming and pretend that he never had to go to the bathroom. He used to get up extra early and go to the ocean, and that's where he would use the facilities, and he would tell people that he's a god because he didn't have to. Never, you know. So he would get up early. So you know, imagine all the kings did that trick, and they all. Does that mean? In other words, so it's a nice vart, I think, David. Yeah, but I don't think that's the meaning of the Mishnah. But definitely a nice inspirational vart. You know, you could tell someone, you know, how you talking, how could it be the kings get up to, or even the lazy bums, you know, the kings who think that they're God, they own the world. These rebellious kings get up at 3 hours. How you talking? You for Hashem, you're not gonna get up before. Yeah, that's a very nice part, I think. Shkayach. Okay, so then the Gemara said that the halacha is like a cherem also for other mitzvahs. What other mitzvah also depends on this time called Misha Yakir, when you can recognize someone that's about 6 to 8 feet away from you, and you recognize him when it's light enough, besides artificial light. There's no artificial light if you're in mountains, and there's no electricity there, and you see someone 6 to 8 feet away. That's when you can start saying Shema. What other mitzvah does this apply to? So the Gemara here said another mitzvah that follows this. What other mitzvah did our Gemara say?
There was something about going to the shul to pray.
Right. Well, I did mention
to
that certain
recognize your
shuls.
friend in the street.
Well, we did mention that certain shuls want to daven Shachris early, and they do have issues with this. So, what were the issues that they have? So the time of Misha Yakir is not only the time for Shema, but it's also the time for another mitzvah. So our Gemara on the maybe 7th line from the medium-sized lines said another mitzvah.
Was it talis and tefillin?
Tefillin. Our Gemara said tefillin, but really the law applies to talis as well. Our Gemara said that Omer Abaye for tefillin, the halacha is like a cherem. And then we mentioned about the vasikin, which Rashi says means people that are mechabev mitzvahs, people that love mitzvahs. They're humble people that cherish mitzvahs. When do they say the Shema and the Shemoneh Esrei? So on this, does anyone want to spell that out? When do the vasikin people, when do they say the Shema and the Shemoneh Esrei?
Before Netzach Hama.
So they say the Shema they finish it with the Netzach Hama, and then they do the Tefillah right after Geula, right after the Netzach Hama. Okay, and they end up davening right when day begins, or when it's clearly day at the Netzach Hama, when everyone agrees is for sure day, is when sunrise happens. They say the Shema. Then we mentioned about how important it is to connect Geula to Tefillah, and a person won't get damaged the whole day if they connect, if they won't get wounded a whole day if they connect Geula, the bracha of Go'al Yisrael, and Tefillah and the Shemoneh Esrei. They won't get damaged, they won't get wounded, they won't get hurt, and they won't even have a financial loss. So as long as you connect Geula to Tefillah. But we mentioned that it's not just connecting Geula to Tefillah, because everyone does that. Who interrupts at that point in the davening? Very rare to interrupt then. So what does the Gemara mean? What is the Gemara referring to when it says that you are Soimech Geula to Tefillah? So we mentioned Teves adds that you're doing something else as well. That not only are you connecting Geula and Tefillah, not only are you not interrupting between the blessings of Shema and the Shemona Esrei, but you're also doing this prayer at a certain time of the day. You're also davening. Does anyone remember what we mentioned from Tosfos, that it's talking about you're doing this at the Vasikin. So you're not only being Soimech Geula to Tefillah, but you're also doing it at a Vasikin. And that's why the Gemara then said a story about someone who said, I did this and I got hurt. And the Gemara has another story that someone, he did this and he didn't, in a smile stayed on his face all day. Like, what was so special about that? It must be because he was also being Soimech Geula to Tefillah at the Vasikin time. In other words, that maybe wasn't the norm. People didn't always wake up at Vasikin. Even nowadays, it's a minority of shuls have a Nates minyan. The Vasikin, the sunrise minyan is not the norm. So when someone does that and they're careful not to interrupt between the Geula and Tefillah, that's when they get this blessing that they won't have a hezek a whole day. And then someone said that Reb Zera said that, he was Soimech Geula to Tefillah, and he obviously meant, and he did it at Nates, at the Vasikin, and he ended up having to bring a gift of myrtle to the king. So how can you say that you don't get damaged? That day is when he had to go to the king and bring some gift. So the other rabbi answered him, Rabbi Yossi ben El-Yakum answered him back. He says, well, really that's not called a loss. You did a mitzvah, and it's right that you should pay for a mitzvah, and to be able to see a king, and even a non-Jewish king is a mitzvah to try to see one, and therefore. It's not a loss. It's you're just paying for a mitzvah, because this way you'll be able to see the difference between a king, the honor given to a king today, and the way the Jewish kings are going to be honored when Mashiach comes. Now, then we had a whole story of Reb Elah told Ula, when you go to Eretz Yisrael, ask about my brother Reb Bruna, because he is a great person, and he is a samach b'mitzvahs. He is a person who he loves mitzvahs. He's happy with mitzvahs. And then it mentions that one day he did this geula to tefillah without interruption, and he davened it nates, at least the Tosfos understands it to mean, and he had a smile on his face all day. That means that a person should always be happy with being lucky that we are able to do mitzvahs. That's really what the Gemara seems to be saying, that we should realize we are Hashem's ambassadors, and we should be proud that we are fulfilling mitzvahs. That's the way we should feel. We should feel proud. And that was the greatness of this Reb Bruna, that he had a smile on his face all day. If you feel that mitzvahs are an honor, so we should be proud, we should be happy that we are lucky to be Hashem's people. Hashem chose us. He chose us from all the nations. So we should feel lucky to be able to do mitzvahs. Now we do mitzvahs. He had a smile on his face all day. Now the Gemara asks, how can you connect Geula to Tefillah? Normally you say a pasuk of of Hashem Sefasai Tiftach. So what's the Gemara's answer to that? Normally you say Hashem Sefasai Tiftach, which is a verse that Hashem should open my mouth, and Fi Yagid Yilastecha, my mouth will speak your praises. So if you say that verse before the Shemona Esrei, before the Amidah, then you're interrupting. So Rabbi Yochanan says you're supposed to say that verse. So how could that? How are you also supposed to not interrupt? You're supposed to say that verse, and you're not supposed to interrupt. So the first answer of the Gemara was. Anyone want to say? Well, what's
say
the
it
first
in the evening.
In the Ma'ariv, that's right. Ben Shkayach. That in the Ma'ariv is when you say that verse this way, because in the Ma'ariv it's not so important not to interrupt. After all, the main redemption was not at night; it was in the morning. That's when we were redeemed fully from Egypt. We left Egypt, even though Pharaoh let us leave at night, wanted us to leave in the middle of the night. But the main redemption is in the day, and therefore the connecting Geula to Tefillah is not so important at night. And additionally, we have Hashkivenu at night. So it makes sense that that night is not, we're not worried about the interruption. So therefore the Gemara said maybe it means at night is when you say this verse of Hashem Sfasai Tiftach. But then the Gemara said that we have a source that says at night you're supposed to connect Geula to Tefillah. And so how could you say it means at night? So the Gemara then answered a different answer, that when does it apply? You should say Hashem Sfasai Tiftach, that verse you should say before Shemona Esrei. Yes, Yehuda? Or anyone know? What was the Gemara's?
It's Mincha.
Mincha. Thank you.
Next they
so
say
Mincha is when you can is when you say that, is when you do that. And then the Gemara said that Rav Ashi says that really you could say the pasuk Hashem Sfasai Tiftach at all the prayers, and it's not a problem. It's not called interruption. Why not? Why is Hashem Sfasai Tiftach not an interruption?
Amen.
It's part of the prayer.
It's considered an extension of the prayer, the Tefillah Arichta.
Yeah.
And the Gemara said that if you don't say that it's called an extension of the prayer, then what are you going to do about Hashkivenu at night when we have the prayer called Hashkivenu at night, which is the second blessing after the Shema, and that blessing seems to interrupt between the blessing Go'al Yisrael and the Shemona Esrei, because it's the first blessing is Go'al Yisrael. That's the Geula, redemption, thanking God for the redemption from Egypt. And the second blessing is Hashkivenu. It seems like it's an interruption. So what are you going to do there? How do you do the evening service without interrupting if you have to say that blessing of Hashkivenu? So the Gemara explains that Hashkivenu really is not a problem. Why isn't it Hashkivenu a problem? What was the Gemara's answer? Hashkivenu is not a problem.
Don't say Amen at the end.
No, it's not about Amen.
Because it's an extended blessing of redemption.
It's extension of Geula. So Hashem Sfasai Tiftach is an extension of Tefillah, of prayer. That it's asking Hashem, open up my mouth. Hashkivenu, put us to sleep in peace, give us protection. That's an extension of the Geula prayer. So you have extension of Geula and extension of Tefillah, and those are not they're not interrupting, because each of them are an extension. What does it mean Hashkivenu is an extension of the redemption? So we explained Hashkivenu is extension of redemption because when they left Egypt, or during the time that the plagues were happening in Egypt, the Jewish people were constantly praying that they should be saved from the plagues. That's what Hashkivenu symbolizes. It commemorates the prayer that we said in Egypt. And because it commemorates that prayer, it's a beautiful insight that I saw brought down, that the Hashkivenu prayer commemorates the time when we were in Egypt and we asked Hashem to save us, protect us from all of those plagues. So if we were protected from all of those plagues in Egypt, and that's what the prayer symbolizes. So it's an extension of the Geula that Hashem saved us in Egypt. So that it's really thanking Hashem for saying Hashkivenu, to give us protection when we go to sleep now, just like you gave us in Egypt. So it's a extension of the redemption, thanking Hashem for the redemption in Egypt. So that is that was the end of the Gemara where we got up to. That both of them are extensions, and therefore it's not an interruption. So we are now 6 lines up from the bottom of the page on page 9b, and we're going to start with the word michti. Michti, let's see. Ha yiyu l'ratzain imrei fi. Now, yiyu l'ratzain, the Gemara earlier mentioned in a very side point. It mentioned before prayer, you say Hashem sefasai tiftach, and the Gemara mentioned that same paragraph. It said at the end you say Yihu l'ratzain imrei fi. We're going back. That you say a verse at the end of the prayer. May it be your desire, the words of my mouth, that may Hashem enjoy hearing the words of my mouth. It should be l'ratzain. It should be Hashem's will to hear the words of my mouth. And we say that pasuk as well after Shemoneh Esrei, and that's what our Gemara mentioned earlier. Now the Gemara now goes back to it. It says, let's see, this Yiyu l'ratzain imrei fi, this verse, beautiful verse, is mashma l'b'sayf. It implies after you pray, it implies that you're saying about a prayer that you already said, may it be Hashem's will to hear that prayer that I said. In other words, Hashem should accept it and enjoy hearing it. And so it implies something that you already said, but it also implies something that you will say, because it could go both. I'm going to just mute everyone. I hear background noise. The verse Yiyu l'ratzain does imply both prayer that was said already and a prayer of the future, and both of them can be fitting. This verse can apply to both of them. So the Gemara is wondering, why do we only say it after the Shemoneh Esrei? Let's say it before the Shemoneh Esrei, because it's a beautiful verse asking Hashem to accept our prayer. So it could go before as well. Michti, ha yiyu l'ratzain imrei fi. This verse of yiyu l'ratzain imrei fi, mashma l'b'sayf, it implies about after at the end of a prayer to say it. Umashma, it also implies me'ikara, that it could be said before a prayer, debi'ina l'meimer, that you want to say a prayer, you could say this verse. My time ataknuhu rabbanon. Why did the rabbis establish it? La'achar yudches brachos, leimru me'ikara, let them say it, let them establish to say it, me'ikara, in the beginning of the Shemoneh Esrei. Why do we only say it at the end? Li'achar yudches brachos, after the 18 blessings of the Shemoneh Esrei of the Amidah. We should say it at the beginning. So the Gemara, Leimru me'ikara, at the beginning. I'm sorry, I skipped. Leimru me'ikara, let them say it in the beginning. Amar Rabbi Yehuda b'rei Reb Shimon ben Pazi. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Reb Shimon ben Pazi, says, Hayil v'loi amru David, since David didn't say it, Elo la'achar yudches parshiyos, only after 18 chapters of the Tehillim, that's when David HaMelech said this verse. Lefichach, therefore, Takinu Rabbanon, the rabbis established it, la'achar yudches brachos, after 18 brachos. So does anyone know which chapter Yihiyu l'ratzain imrei fi is in the Tehillim? It's a chapter of Tehillim. Yihiyu l'ratzain imrei fi. It's a chapter of Tehillim. Which chapter is it in that verse? So the Gemara here said that David HaMelech said it at the end of the 18th chapter, and that's why the rabbi said, say it after the 18 blessings of the Shemoneh Esrei, which makes a lot of sense. The only thing is, if you look in your Tehillim, it's really at the end of the 19th chapter. So how does that fit with the Gemara that says it's at the end of the 18th chapter? It's really at the end of the 19th chapter. So the Gemara asked this question, Hani Yudches Yudtes Havyon. These 18 chapters that you're telling me it's at the end of the 18th, It's 19, Yud Tes Havian. There's 19 chapters of Tehillim before you have the verse Yiyu L'Ratzon Imrei Fi. So it doesn't flow. Your whole claim is you want to say this after the 18 brachas because it fits so beautifully with the 18 chapters of Tehillim, and you're saying it at the end of the 18 chapters. It's at the end of the 19th chapter. There's 19. So the Gemara answers, Ashrei Ha'ish, V'lama Ragshu Goyim, Chada Parshahi. That Ashrei Ha'ish and Lama Ragshu Goyim is really one chapter, and therefore it's really, even though our Tehillim say it's at the end of the 19th chapter, but really chapter 1 and 2 is really considered one chapter. So when it says chapter 3 in your Tehillim, it's really chapter 2. When it says chapter 10 in your Tehillim, it's really chapter 9. And when it says chapter 19 in your Tehillim, it's really chapter 18. And the rabbi said at the end of chapter 18, the real chapter 18 is, it says this Yiyu L'Ratzon Imrei Fi, and therefore that's why the rabbis established it at the end of the Shemoneh Esrei, because it's really at the end of chapter 18 of Tehillim. Now, the problem is, why do our Tehillim say Ashrei Ha'ish, the first chapter, and Lama Ragshu as two separate chapters? Really, it's supposed to be one. The Gemara here clearly says it's one. So the rabbis try to figure out, there's a lot of discussion among the commentaries that, number one, there's a Masorah. The Masorah is that it's really divided in two, even though there is the Talmudic opinion is that it's one, but the Masorah, we go by the Masorah that it's two, and therefore it seems like there's two views. It's like there's two ways of looking at it. So there's one way of looking at it that way. There's another way of looking at it this way. They're both correct. They're both correct, and therefore the rabbis followed the Talmudic view, but at the same time there's also a Masorah view, and which are both Torah, and therefore it's both ways are correct. There is another explanation that's given, and that really answers the question a little better. Why our Tehillims are divided, and that is because there's a Gemara later on that tells us that the rabbis added a 19th bracha. Now, when the rabbis added a 19th bracha to the Shemoneh Esrei, they wanted to also follow the Tehillim. The problem is the Tehillim has the Yiyu L'Ratzon after 18 brachas. So therefore, the rabbi said, you know what? Let's divide the first chapter in two. So it was the rabbis who divided the first chapter into two after they made the 19 brachas of Shemoneh Esrei. Therefore, they changed they divided the Tehillim, the first chapter of Tehillim, into two, and to correspond to the new bracha that they made for the 19 brachas. And so, really, initially, when we only had a Shemoneh Esrei, we only had 18. It was the verse Yiyu L'Ratzon was after 18 chapters of Tehillim. Now, when they added the 19th blessing, they added a bracha to because they wanted a bracha to destroy the Apikorsim, the Koifrim, the Lamalshinim, those the Lamalshinim are those that are telling the government on the Jewish people that there were very evil Jewish people that they made a special blessing to, that they should be destroyed. Those that were exceedingly evil. We're not talking about people who sin. We're talking about people who are destructive to the Jewish people. And so they made a blessing. They were trying to convert people to other, and so on. So those people, we added a bracha to that they should be destroyed. So when they did that, they also divided up the first bracha, the first chapter of Tehillim, into two. And this way you have 19 brachas, and then you have the verse Yiyu L'Ratzon, and everything flows perfectly. So initially there was 149 chapters of Tehillim, and when the rabbis divided it, it ended up being 150 chapters of Tehillim. That's what it seems like. So that's the Gemara here about the division of the Tehillim. Yes.
Rabbi Steinsaltz says in the notes that while the book of Tehillim, as we know it, apparently, and also the sages of the Talmud knew it, divided into 150. But older traditions that are cited in the Medrash divided into 147.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
147. Does he explain what the other Tehillims that
No.
are supposed to go together are?
Well, the only other thing that he says after that is that what you just said, that the chapters that now appear separately were once united. Since the first two chapters are similar in content, and since there's no introductory phrase in the second chapter, they can easily be integrated into a single chapter. So he only brings the one example, but he says it used to be 147. It's brought in Medrash, and this is prior to the Masorah of the sages in the Gemara that said it's 150. Prior to that, it was 147. It's brought in the Medrash. There were other older traditions.
Okay, well, that's going to be homework. If anyone could find out which of the other Tehillims are also supposed to be compounded together with, there's only really 147. That'll be
you need Rashi
credit
on Steinsaltz. You need Rashi on Rabbi Steinsaltz.
Mm-hmm. Well, we can still do our homework. We might find something online. So if anyone wants to check out online and see what Tehillims are really supposed to be together and they just got divided, be something interesting to see. It's very interesting because there's also in Chumash, there are many parshas that are, we sometimes double up because of the year. Now, however, there is a discrepancy because in the Zohar it calls the parshas of the Torah Gan Parshas HaTorah. There's 53 parshas of the Torah, and in the Chumash, if you look, there's really 54. And so, how does that flow? And so, in the one of the answers, there are numerous answers. Either Bereshis is more like an introduction. That's one answer, so it's not counted in the it's not counted in the Zohar. Another answer is that Nitzavim and Vayelach, which are often read together, they're really supposed to be one parsha, and it's just on certain years we need to divide them. It's not that some years we double up Nitzavim and Vayelach. Nitzavim and Vayelach is different than all the other doubles. That there is such an opinion brought down that Nitzavim and Vayelach really is one parsha, but some years we divide it. All the others are we have two parshas, but we need to double up because we need to finish before the end of the year. We need to finish the Chumash. But Nitzavim and Vayelach, there is an opinion that it's really officially one parsha. And that's how you have 53. So just a similar, just a similar idea to what we're talking about in the Gemara about the Tehillim being doubled up and so on. Okay, let's continue with the next piece of Gemara. The Amar Rabbi Yehuda Berei Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, because Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, said, Kuf Gimel Parshiyos Amar David. David HaMelech said 103 Parshiyos. V'loi Amar Halaluka Ad Shara b'Mapalosan Shel Rishoyim. He didn't say the word Halaluka until he saw that the Rishoyim, the evil people, had their downfall. When he saw the evil people had their downfall, he said Hallelujah. And when does he say that? After 103 chapters. Shenemar, as it says, Yitamu chatoim min haaretz u'rishayim oideinam. The evil, the wicked will be removed, will be destroyed, ended from earth, and there won't be wicked anymore. Baruchi nafshi es Hashem Hallelujah. And he blesses as Hashem, hallelujah. So that should be at the end of 103 chapters. The only thing is, at the end of 103 chapters of Tehillim, it doesn't end off with hallelujah. It says, Baruch nafshi es Hashem, period. It doesn't say. At the end of chapter 104, it says, Yitamu chatom in eretz Hashem medina baruch nafshi es Hashem, hallelujah. It says this verse, and it says hallelujah at the end of 104. So how come Rabbi Shimon, the Rabbi Yehuda, the Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, says that it's at the end of 103 chapters, and he didn't say hallelujah until he saw the destruction of the wicked, And then he said, finally said, now Hani Kuf Gimel Kuf Daled Havyon. These 103 is really 104. Ella, rather, Shma Mina, we hear from this, Ashrei Ha'ish, V'lama Rag Shugayim, that the Ashrei Ha'ish chapter and the Lama Rag Shugayim, chapter 1 and chapter 2 of Tehillim, is Chada Parsha, is really one chapter. Even though we have it as two, it's really one. The Amar Reb Shmuel Bar Nachmani and Reb Yochanan, because Reb Shmuel Bar Nachmani said in the name of Reb Yochanan, and now we're on page 10, page Yud Amud Aleph. We just turned the page to Yud Amud Aleph. Kol Parsha Shoisa Chaviv Al David, any Parsha, any chapter that was precious to David, Pasach Ba Be'ashrei, he started it with the word Ashrei, V'siyem Ba Be'ashrei, and he ended it with Ashrei. Pasach Be'ashrei, he started it with Ashrei, D'chsiv Ashrei Ha'ish, because it says Ashrei Ha'ish, praiseworthy is the man, in the first chapter of Tehillim. V'siyem Ba'ashrei, and he ended it with Ashrei, D'chsiv Ashrei Kol Choisei Bai. It says Ashrei Kol Choisei Bai, it ends with the word Ashrei, which means that the first and second chapter is really one chapter that starts with Ashrei and ends with Ashrei. And on this, Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that this would be an example of a chapter that was especially enjoyable to David HaMelech, this chapter of Tehillim. It's one chapter, and it's because it's referred to as one chapter by Reb Shmuel Bar Nachmani in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, because he calls it a chapter that starts with Ashrei and ends with Ashrei. Now, according to us, it really isn't. It isn't one chapter; it's two separate chapters. It doesn't start and end with Ashrei. The answer is it used to. The way it was set up, it was set up that way that it's one chapter, and therefore David HaMelech considered this a very enjoyable chapter. Now, the question is the way the Gemara says this. It sounds like this is. It sounds like this is a common occurrence, that there's many chapters that start with Ashrei and end with Ashrei. However, Tosfos asks over here, this is the only one. Why do you make it like all the chapters that David HaMelech liked, he started with Ashrei, ends with Ashrei? There's only one. It seems like David HaMelech only found one to be that he really enjoyed. But the way you said it, it sounds like there's numerous ones throughout Tehillim, or there's a number of them. You know, it's a little surprising. There's only one that starts with Ashrei, which is the number of chapter 1 and 2. So the Gemara so Tosfos answers that doesn't mean that it starts with Ashrei and ends with Ashrei. That's what's cherishable by David. It means that anyone that begins and ends with the same praise, that is what is cherishable by David HaMelech. So, for example, the Ashrei prayer, it starts with, if you take the Ashrei prayer, it's a very similar beginning and end. It starts with Tehillah LaDavid, and it ends with Tehillas Hashem Yadaber Pi. So, because of that, that would be also a prayer that's cherished. It doesn't start with Ashrei and ends with Ashrei, because even though we add the word Ashrei, we add a verse, Ashrei Yishvei V'secha, but that and Ashrei Shekachalai, but that's not in this chapter of Tehillim. It's actually one of the verses is from the chapter before, and then another verse is from a previous chapter much earlier. But nevertheless, it starts with Tehillah LaDavid and it ends with Tehillas Hashem. So therefore, it's considered a chapter that Hashem cherishes, that David HaMelech cherished. He liked it because he started and ended with the same words. And the same thing applies to all the Hallelujahs, which we say in davening. They start with Hallelujah and end with Hallelujah, and therefore those are also all cherished by David HaMelech. These are special Tehillims that David HaMelech cherished, and therefore they're all. And maybe that's why we say them in davening. What's interesting is there is a concept in Sefer Yetzirah that says Na'ot Soifan B'Tchilasan, that Hashem likes to put the end of things in the beginning and the beginning in the end, which I'm wondering if it's connected to this idea that something that you like, you hint to it in the beginning and in the end, like you do the same thing. Very often, like you'll try to find a connection between the beginning of a book and the end of a book, based on that Sefer Yetzirah, that the beginning and the end, they say they have the same theme. No'ot soifan b'tchilasan. It literally means it stabs the beginning and the end and the beginning, that it connects the two, the beginning and the end. So I'm wondering if that is the same idea, that something that you really cherish, you write the beginning, you write an idea that you're going to have in the end, you sort of hint to it in the beginning, and the idea in the end, you hint to something you start with in the beginning. Yes, Miranda.
So I'm wondering if this has something to do with the infinite, that Hashem has this infinite energy about him. So like the beginning and the end, kind of like a circle.
It's a circle.
Kind of an
Interesting,
idea.
right? A circle is
Something,
infinite.
I don't know.
There's no beginning and end. It sort of like shows the infinity of Hashem. And the same thing maybe applies to why David HaMelech
So these tefillin,
put the Tehillim that he liked, to show the direct connection to Hashem, that it's there's no end, there's no beginning and no end. Interesting. Very, very nice thought, Miranda. Thank you. Okay, so that
Rabbi, is this like we say in Lachadu, the first in thought, last in creation?
Yeah. Right. Seif Ma'aseh Machshava Tchila. Yeah, similar to that idea. Right. But I guess that's a good connection as well. Yeah, Seif Ma'aseh Machshava Tchila. There is a Gemara also that talks about the wording of Havdalah, and it does say about mentioning the Chasima, the beginning of the bracha in the end. It has something to do with the Havdalah on a Yom Tov, about mentioning the beginning and the end. That a bracha, we try to mention the way you start it with Mavdil ben Kodesh l'Kodesh, and which is on Yom Tov, and something the way it's started. I have to look up the Gemara, but I think there is some Gemara that talks about a connection between the beginning of a bracha and the end of a bracha. As well, so that would be something to look up. I have to look up the Havdalah, the different opinions of how the Havdalah at the end of Yom Tov is said. If Shabbos, when Shabbos falls on Yom Tov, when the end of Shabbos on a Yom Tov, so how do you say the Havdalah? So I think there also it uses a similar term. I wonder if there's some connection there. Okay, something to look into. Let's begin. I guess we have 2 more minutes. Let's continue. Hanu bar Yoini dahavu b'shevuse de Reb Meir. There were those bar Yoini are boors, people that are wicked people. Amei haaretz. They have no connection to Torah. They don't care about doing mitzvahs, and they lived in the neighborhood of Reb Meir. Bahava kamatzari leituva. They were bothering him a lot. Hava kaboy Reb Meir rachme ilavayu. Reb Meir wanted to ask Hashem for mercy on them, ki heiche de leimusu, that they should die. Now, think about those words. He wanted to ask Hashem for mercy on them, that they should die. He felt so bad for them that he felt terrible, that he was davening for them that they should die. What does that mean? So the commentaries explain that in a certain sense, it was actually a blessing for them. That, in other words, normally Hashem likes to give them their rewards in this world. In this way, they will get all their reward that they deserve in a minimized form, and their punishment will be in the next world. And Reb Meir felt bad for them, so to speak. They're so wicked, and they are going to end up losing their entire Olam Haba. And he felt bad for them, and he really felt that if they would have bad time in this world, they would get punished for their sins in this world or die. They ultimately will be able to benefit, at least the few mitzvahs that they have, let them benefit in the world to come. And so he davened for them, he wanted to daven that they should die. And Amra laid Beruria Devisu, Beruria, brilliant wife of his, the daughter of Chanina ben Chiradion, she told him, my daitoch, what are you thinking? Mishum dechsiv yitamu chatoim, because of that verse that we mentioned earlier, which is a verse that the wicked should end, should be destroyed from the earth. You think that's a good source? That's your source why you want to daven for them to die? Miksiv chaitim, does it say sinners should die? Chatoim ksiv, which means sins should end. That means the sins should end. V'oid, and also shvil sefer dekra, go to the end of the verse, u'rishoyim oidenam, that they are no longer wicked. Now, kivan the yitamu chatoim. Now, if you destroy these, if you destroy the chaytim, kivan the yitamu chaytim, rishoyim oidenam. Does it make sense to say the rishoyim, there won't be any more rishoyim? It must mean that, or actually, there must be different ways of reading this. Kivan the yatamu chatoim, since the chatoim will end, or since that's probably a better way to read it. Kivan the yatamu chatoim, since the sins will end, rishoyim oidenam, they will no longer be rishoyim. And so that's what it means, that you should daven that they should stop sinning. Elo boy rachmi lavayu de lahadru b'tshuva. Ask mercy on them that they should do tshuva, or rishoyim oidenam, and they won't be wicked anymore. Boy rachmi lavayu v'hadru b'tshuva. He asked mercy on them, and they actually ended up doing tshuva. So this is a beautiful ending for this story. I think there might be a way of reading that it's a question. Kivan the yatamu chatoim. If the sinners end, rishoyim oidenam, are there no? Oh, that's what it means. If you daven for them to die, they're no longer going to be wicked people in the world? There'll be no wicked people in the world. So what does it mean? Yitamu chatoim rishoyim oidenam. It must mean that their sins will end and they won't be wicked anymore. That's what it means. And that's what the Gemara answers, that he ended up davening for them so that they should do tshuva, and they did tshuva, and that they lived happily ever after. Not exactly, Reb Meir had a lot of tzaras in his life, but at least he didn't have tzaras from these wicked people. So that is the end of it. It's very interesting. The Gemara, the commentaries talk about how did he daven for them to do tshuva. Can you daven for someone to do tshuva? Is that acceptable? Normally, everything is in the hands of the person. Hakol bidei shamayim chutz miyira shamayim. That anything that's about fear of heaven, it's all about them. They have to come up with it themselves. You can't ask Hashem to make someone do tshuva, because it's beyond Hashem's business. That's the person's bechira to do tshuva or not. So you're going to ask Hashem to encourage to make them do tshuva. It's not that. Hashem doesn't mix into that. That's where Hashem gives you free choice. But the question is not such a strong question, really, because at least the way the commentaries answer it, it seems like the answer is pretty obvious, that you're not making them do tshuva. You're just asking that it should be easier for them to do tshuva, that they should be encouraged, have a easier pathway to do tshuva. Of course, they have free choice in the end, but you're just hoping that Hashem will help them open the path for them, make the opportunity a little easier for them to do tshuva. But of course, they're going to have to make that free choice and decide to do tshuva on their own. So it's not really a contradiction of free choice. Okay, everyone, have a wonderful Shabbos, and sei gesund.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos, Rabbi. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.